Hello, everyone. I wanted to take a minute to introduce my colleagues, Susan Gross, Anna Politskaya.
Hello.
Dave Clausen is here with me. You'll see him in a second when he talks about mastery, and myself, Lisa Mulvihill. So we wanted to put together a recording because there had been some requests to have some of these talks at various meetings. And we thought it would be better to have a recording that was accessible for whatever time people wanted to use it. So we've put together this presentation that we've done a couple of times called the 5 M's of Mental Health. And during COVID, I saw Dr. Sue Varma, who is a psychiatrist, talk about the 4 M's of mental health. So she talked about meaningful connections, mastery, mindfulness, and movement. We added another M called monitoring, which we feel is really important. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. We are all psychological services consultants with the Waterloo Region District School Board. And we're going to take about the next 50 to 60 minutes to take you through these 5 M's of mental health. If you Google the 5 M's of mental health, you'll probably see other M's that people have added, but these are the ones that we thought were particularly important. We don't want to overwhelm you and make you feel like you have to make all these changes right away. Dr. Adele LaFrance talks about making, one change or 1 degree of change. And she compares it to when you go on a vacation on an airline and the air traffic controller changes your flight just by 1 degree, you'll end up in a totally different place. So if you think about that kind of analogy with this, if you change just one thing, just 1 degree of change, it can result in a bigger change, hopefully, in your day-to-day life and the lives of your kiddos. So I think Anna is going to take us through mastery.
Actually, meaningful connections, just for starters. But thank you, Lisa. And I think it does make sense to start with meaningful connections, even though we could have gone in pretty much any order. All these M's we are going to talk about are very important, and you can and should be starting in a place where you feel the most comfortable and the most ready. At the same time, we know that the connections with others is a really important part of anyone's well-being. If we learn anything good from pandemic, is that those connections do matter. We really missed our families, our friends, going out, being part of a bigger group, going to places where you just feel connected and you feel that you belong. And once it was taken away or limited during the 2.5 years of pandemic, and for some of us it still might be limited and restricted in some ways, we notice the impact on our well-being. So the first M that we are going to focus for the next few minutes is the ability of a parent or of a caregiver to build the connections that are meaningful within the family or in that one-on-one relationship. First, and it's easy on paper, it looks very simple on this little slide, and yet we know how hard it is to listen and pay attention to another person, especially if your child is experiencing a crisis or is not doing well or is experiencing some big emotions. It's really hard to just listen, and yet it is extremely powerful. So first, try to pay attention to what's going on, notice and listen to what they're saying. What are they communicating to you? And that can really help you to build that initial step in the establishing the connection with your teen. So what does it allow you to do? And you listen to them complain, or you listen to them saying something you maybe not necessarily want to hear. You can go to the next step and validate the feeling. Once you heard them, you are usually pretty capable of naming the feeling that they're experiencing. So whether that's anger, whether that is sadness, whether that is frustration, even if it's a quite unpleasant emotion for you to hear and to witness and to kind of be part of, your ability to validate that those feelings have a right to exist is a very powerful way to build a connection to the human in your life, right? It could be your child, but it could be actually anyone else. If a friend is calling you and they're frustrated, you're probably going to hear them out. When it's your child, it might be a little harder because your emotions are going to run really intense too, and you might be experiencing pretty similar feelings. So validating that those feelings have a right to exist is connecting both of you. In another talk that we will have a reference to at the end, and we'll talk about the resources, we talk about the power of co-regulation and validation together, and they work hand in hand. When one family member, when one person in a group is experiencing strong emotions or not doing well, chances are so are the others in that group or others in the family. We are connected, we are social beings, and by your ability to regulate your own emotions, you're helping the other person, your child, to regulate it. And validation is the ability to name the emotion of the other and accept that that emotion has a right to exist. And Lisa, maybe she can add a little bit to this if you'd like, Lisa. We have a link to the video where Lisa explains how Della France uses the validation as a powerful tool to de-escalate anger or huge frustration by first naming the emotion and then bringing that crisis down by naming becauses in that process. So if someone is feeling angry, you can first acknowledge, and with a teenager, you'd probably say, I'm guessing you're feeling angry right now. Or, of course, you're feeling angry because, you know, the test was really hard. You didn't have time to prepare for it due to late training session last night. And of course, you're feeling angry because your friends are not supporting you. Something that you know about your teenager's life going on. Lisa, you want to add to that, maybe?
Sure. I just think that with validation, one of the things that I struggle with, and I give talks on this and still struggle with my own son, is that it's hard to see our kids in distress, right? And so we want to fix it right away. And sometimes we have to wait and we have to meet them where they're at, validate. I know this is hard. I know this is stressful because. And the three reasons or the three becauses have been shown to be quite useful in terms of bringing kids' emotions down so that then they can problem solve. So the message with this is try not to be a fixer too fast because it's annoying. It's like when someone says to you, calm down or relax, and you are not calm or relaxed and you just want to scream. So it's sort of meet kids where they're at and then bring them down, and then you can move to support and problem solving.
And those videos are really helpful. You can watch Lisa's video or Adela France's video on her website, and it can really walk you through the steps. And I find that ability to not fix things right away and to acknowledge, okay, this is really difficult. We are in crisis, and I understand this is hard, is also connected to the ability to show trust. You have to trust your child that they will get through this crisis and they will be able to problem solve. You have to trust their skills, and you also have to give them choices when it comes to some difficult situations, right? That ability to let go. And I'm sure Susan will talk about that when we talk about mindfulness, is really hard for parents, for all of us. And yet this is what allows us to connect to kids and to actually encourage them to regulate their own emotions and to feel empowered and to feel confident to go on with his life and feel that they're capable of getting through these difficult situations. Now, the two other components of meaningful connections are more about just being with your family members in a way that allow to share, be that sharing interest. And that's really important and sometimes really hard, right? Showing genuine interest in what your teenager is doing. What are they actually maybe watching on that TikTok? And we used to have a no sign for cell phones on the slide, actually, and then we took it away, because sometimes your way to connect with your teen is to look into, okay, let's watch a video. What are you watching? Tell me about it, and allow them to share the interest. At the same time, it might be still a good idea to put away your phone. Is this building this connection needs your full attention and your full dedication, that yes, you showing and you caring about the interest. So if you were doing it while reading a text message, that's probably not going to go very well. Neither would it go very well if they're texting someone. So use of technology could be helpful, but maybe consider how much you are actually paying attention to each other and how much you're actually connecting about interest. We know from research across cultures that sharing meals is a wonderful way to connect family members, be that cooking together or choosing new recipes, exploring new foods. If this is something that your family would enjoy, please do so. It's an easy and pleasant way to connect in a meaningful way and continue that connection through many years for the whole family. Spend time together. We talk a lot about play and how important it is, and yet how many families kind of lost that ability and that fun times through pandemic, because there weren't many opportunities to go outside of immediate family unit. And for other families, that was actually a really good time to explore board games or new ways to play together and to spend time in new routines, and maybe take all family members that are in one household and play soccer or play basketball. Just even if you're not great in playing those sports, it's still a really fun way to just stay active and play together and have fun. So doing things together, whichever really is suitable for your family, is highly important and nice way to build those connections in a meaningful and yet not forceful way, because it's really hard sometimes when you have this goal of, I'm going to build this connection, and then you stressing yourself out on that goal. And instead, if you can just go and have fun and play and do something that is easy and yet allows you to connect, that's a much better way to approach it. And that will contribute to your well-being as well as your kids and other family members' well-being. Anyone wants to add to this?
That's great, Anna. I'm just going to introduce Dave Clausen, and I are in the same room, so we're just going to do a shift here, and Dave's going to talk about mastery.
Thanks, Lisa. All right. So if we think about, our first point as having somebody get you and really understand you, and that they care about you, that's central. That is something that we all need. We all absolutely need. The second thing that we need is to become good at things, and or to have interests. It actually doesn't really matter if we become really good at things. What matters is that we become interested, engaged, involved, and we improve our abilities. And so you'll see on the slide here that there's something called deliberate practice. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that, but I encourage you to go and look it up, because this is something that's really, really powerful in terms of getting better at things. So, the questions on there: what do you enjoy? What does your child enjoy? What do you want to get good at? All of these things are important, and it's nice to have a variety. So we don't want to be strictly video games, for example, or I want to get good at, watching Netflix or have an extensive YouTube catalog in my head. These things are good. They're okay, but we need a variety. Okay. So what matters in this? And I want to talk about just a couple of things, and these are places where people get stuck. Getting good at things requires practice. There's no way around that. And practice usually is frustrating. It's boring. It's something that we don't necessarily want to do. If you think about what it requires, what skills you need in order to become a good writer, it's practice. Do it again and again. Get feedback. Go back, revise. Same's true of sports. Same's true of music. Anybody who's played the piano knows you need to do the scales a million times in order to get good at them. And this is hard. It's boring, and it can be frustrating at times. People don't like making mistakes. And one of the things that's required in order to get good at something is you need to push yourself a little bit. And making mistakes is an inevitable result of that. And so we need to be able to tolerate mistakes in order to get good. So these are some of the places where people get stuck. One of the ways I like to think about this is in terms of cycles. And so when you see a child or an adult decide that they're going to become good at something, and you see them make really good progress, you almost always see what I would call a virtuous cycle. A virtuous cycle has several different components. They feel good. They're interested. They enjoy the sense of progress that they're making, something along that. But there's a positive emotion attached to that. There might be negative ones too, but there are certainly positive ones. 2, there is a belief that I can do this. And there is sort of tracking of getting better. It's usually not formal, but it's like, hey, I can do this and I can get better. And there's this belief that that sort of pushes you along as well. 3, there's a behavior, and the behavior is really consistent. You do the thing that you want to get better at. So if you had watched pretty well any NHL hockey player from the time that they were a child, what would they have been doing? They would have been playing hockey or practicing their skills again and again and again. You do it, you do it, you do it, you do it. So these 3 things are really important. Feels good, I believe I can do it, and I do it. 4th one is not quite as important, but it's often there. If there is a sense of skill, I am good at this. Okay, and there's a belief that I can do this. So there's some basic skill to start off with, and then skill improves. Then that's another element. So we have 4 elements in a virtuous cycle. And if we flip them on their head, we actually get what we call a vicious cycle. And so the vicious cycle is, so in the virtuous cycle, people get better and better and better and better. In the virtuous cycle, people get better. In the vicious cycle, people do not progress. And it contains all 4 of those elements again. First element is emotion, and the emotion is usually negative. It feels awful. I do not enjoy doing this. All I have to do for myself is think about practicing piano as a child, and I get this emotion, and it's like, ooh, I don't like that feeling very much. Okay. Along with that, there's a negative belief. I can't do this. I am not very good at this. And again, if I think about piano, that is absolutely what I believed. It does not matter what I do. I will never be good at this. Okay. The behavior is avoidance. I do not do this. And all you would have had to do is ask my parents, how much does Dave practice the piano? And they would have said, pretty well never. And that is absolutely, that this is one of the reasons that I personally didn't progress as a piano player. I didn't practice. I didn't do the behavior. And my skill was lousy. There is no question about that. And it was sort of right there in front of me. And so that turned into a vicious cycle where I avoided, I believed I couldn't do it. And there were all these negative feelings attached to it. Our goal in a lot of ways, because we see kids who get stuck in vicious cycles, our goal is to turn that into a virtuous cycle. And the neat thing about it is you can intervene at any one of these 4 points that we've talked about. If you change the emotion, you can turn the vicious cycle into a virtuous cycle. If you change the belief, you can do the same thing. If you change the behavior, you can do the same thing. If you improve the skill level, suddenly we can start moving. And we had a really neat example. We've seen lots of neat examples of that, but we had a neat example of that in one of the presentations that we did, where one of the parents who was presenting, their child moved from being somebody who believed they were not capable of writing and were not capable of that kind of academic work into somebody who was very good at it, enjoyed it, and got a lot of positives out of it. Okay, so don't get stuck. Okay, we all have our favorite places where we like to intervene. We may intervene at emotion or at thought or at behavior or at skill level, but if it's not working, then we move on to something else, try something different, and or try a couple of things at the same time, see where you can get to. So pay attention to that kind of stuff, because having some sense of mastery and developing these virtuous cycles, whether it be school, whether it be sports, whether it be arts, in some ways, really, really positive, really beneficial for the kids. Okay, I don't know if anybody's got anything to add to that.
I might add that it's really hard for kids not to see progress, right? There's this great desire to achieve the mastery, so that motivation. And for some kids, it's really hard to not get there quick enough, and then they give up. And that can frustrate parents quite a bit. And that's when I think that trust and validation comes in. And you have to, as a parent, validate that, yes, this is hard not to see, yourself being the best violin player or the best hockey player within the first 3 practices. It's just really hard sometimes to not get there quick enough, and make those mistakes might be quite frustrating. And yet this is how you get to that level of being really good, by making those mistakes and learning from these mistakes. And I think that is the piece that sometimes it's really hard for parents, and actually for teachers too, right? When you see someone giving up, you think, oh, they lack motivation. Sometimes they actually almost have too much motivation, and they really want to be really good very quickly.
And I think what Anna brings up is a really important point. We're talking about 5 M's. These things are not independent of each other. They all overlap, right? So we move back and forth between mastery and meaningful connection all the time. Super important. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Anna. And I think I'm going to disappear off the screen and hand it back to Lisa here.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So as I said in the beginning, the M that we decided to add is monitoring. And this is something we actually, when we go into classrooms, we talk to kiddos about all the time, is about noticing and being aware. So, noticing what's going on for you in a situation and noticing what's going on for our kids. Kids, we talk to them about, again, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they're doing. And sometimes you kind of go through things on autopilot, and I don't know if you've ever driven somewhere and all of a sudden you arrive and you're like, whoa, I'm not sure how I did that, which is kind of unsettling, but it's also kind of, you just go into autopilot. So we want to encourage you to be aware of what's going on. And like I said, not only for yourself, but what's going on for your child. And we have a picture here sort of an air flight monitoring station, right? Where the people are watching the air flights come in. It's really important for them to be noticing what's going on, because something could happen. It's a glimpse, right, into what's going on. So if you consider the next slide, if you want to flip to the next one, Anna, we made this little picture because it's kind of an interaction of all these things, right? You're monitoring yourself, your child, and the environment. So I'm going to give an example, and we could give an example of COVID or the terrible thing that's happening with Russia and the Ukraine. We want to monitor the environment in terms of what's on the TV all the time, what's going on in the background. So the same thing for COVID, the same thing if if you're old enough to remember or being alive during 9/11, how many times did we see that footage over and over again? Keeping an eye on what's going on in the environment is super important. Have a break from it. And you probably heard during COVID, mental health professionals talking about have a break from the updates, have a break from what's going on, and have some meaningful engagement, engage in some mastery. And, when you think about yourself, we're often barometers for our children, right? If we're upset, if our children are intuitive, they'll notice, right, what's going on for us. And so notice what you're doing for yourself. Keep an eye on what's going on, your thoughts, your behaviors, your emotions, and then adjust where you need to. And then the same thing for your children. Notice their emotions, their behaviors, their thought processes. Because often the point of intervention comes from knowing what's going on. It's hard to intervene and help if you're not monitoring, if you're not looking at what's going on. So if it's emotions, we might do some of the things that Anna talked in terms of, seems like you're feeling sad, upset, confused. And then if it's thoughts, we might try to adjust those thoughts into realistic but more positive thoughts. And if it's behavior and they're sitting around watching the TV all the time, maybe we want to intervene there and have them stop watching the news or stop engaging in that and engage in mastery or baking or, engaging with others. So for me, one of the conversations that we had about the 4 M's in terms of adding monitoring was so important, because this is really a fantastic starting point, I think, for figuring out, what do I need to do? Like, if you don't notice, how do you know where to intervene? So that's, I think, why we added this point and why we felt it was so important. Does anybody want to add anything to the importance of monitoring and keeping aware and noticing? All good? Okay. So now we are going to move on to Susan with mindfulness.
Yes, I'm going to be talking about the M of mindfulness. And this exactly links to the idea Lisa was just talking about of monitoring. The ability to pause, to notice and monitor and fully pay attention to what's going on in our environment, for our children, and for ourselves. So mindfulness is the practice of being mindful. We spend considerable time being mindless, or with our minds too full even. And this is how we get things done and how we keep things moving forward, we think, but we can get too used to this. We often simply spend our time on autopilot, as Lisa mentioned too, in those mindless moments and missing what's happening in the now. My kids too often chide me for not truly listening to them, because I may have been looking at them trying hard to listen, but I'm also thinking about something else preoccupying my mind. And I did miss out on that moment with them, and they notice. So mindfulness is the practice of being aware in the present moment, not in the past, longing for or regretting things, or jumping ahead to thinking about the future, hoping it's going to be better or fretting about something. So mindfulness is staying aware and present in this moment, and then the next moment after that. And with practice, being able to do this more and more. The other part of being mindful is being in this moment without judgment, without judging whether we're doing the right thing or saying the right thing or wishing we were somewhere else or someone else, but simply accepting without judgment or criticism. And mindfulness is a practice because it takes practice. It's kind of like what Dave was saying. It's that deliberate intention to doing something. But this is why I like the non-judgment part of it. If I'm trying to be mindful and my mind is surging ahead or drifting to the past, or my kids notice I wasn't listening, I can notice that and accept that and return to the moment. So the next slide takes us to a mindfulness practice of breathing. So pausing to notice our breath. Our breath is always with us, so pausing to pay mindful attention to our breathing can be a way to ground us and coax us into that moment and into our bodies and get us out of our busy minds and our constant reacting to things. And we can model this with our children, and we can practice it with them. We might offer it to our kids when they're feeling calm, so they can notice how it feels when they're slowed down, and they can pay attention to that in and out of their breath. And we can also offer it to them when they're stressed. Maybe they're panicking about how much homework they have, or if they can't get to sleep. And there are many, many different breathing practices. Research has actually shown that there are different practices that might serve different functions. There's breathing that we can do to get us revved up and excited, maybe when we're tired. And there's breathing practices that can pull us out of our thoughts into the now. But most often we think of breathing practices as a way to slow down and pause and relax our minds and our bodies. One important thing we've learned about breath is the value of breathing in through our nose and holding, and then exhaling a bit longer out of our mouth. So a couple practices you might have heard of, we can try out together here quickly, include something called 4-7-8 breathing. We're going to just try it together now, just really quickly. So breathing in to the count of 4, holding for a count of 7, and breathing out for a count of 8. Or there's another practice called box breathing, which is really similar. So imagining a box and breathing into the count of 4, holding for a count of 4, breathing out for a count of 4, and then pausing for a count of 4. I did that a bit quickly, but if you've tried this, just continue while I continue to share. Breathing in this way activates what's called our parasympathetic nervous system, which calms our stress response that we all have of maybe trying to fight against something or flee or freeze up. So activating this parasympathetic nervous system slows down our heart rate, lowers our blood pressure, and relaxes our nervous system. And it's been found to have lots of physiological and mental health benefits. And the more often we practice this technique, the more quickly we'll notice those kinds of results. And there's all kinds of times when your child might find this breathing helpful, and give it a try. Maybe at work when you're experiencing stress or feeling overwhelmed, or right before a presentation, or while driving in traffic, or helping your children through their exams and studying, or at night when trying to fall asleep. The next slide leads to another sort of aspect of mindfulness about being present in the body and the senses. Our busy lives pull for attention of our mind constantly. So breathing, pausing, and mindfully attending to our body and senses in that non-judgmental way can reduce stress and improve well-being. And there are many ways we can practice this and encourage our kids to notice and practice as well. We can practice something called mindful eating, just slowing down when we're eating, enjoying that moment, maybe savoring the flavor and texture, maybe not the whole meal, but maybe just for that bite of chocolate at the end. When our kids are feeling nervous or having trouble sleeping or having that really big emotion, we might be able to pause to notice where that is in our bodies. Is this a tightness in our jaw or our face, or a cramping in our belly? Or is it a heat in our shoulders? And since this is mindful body awareness, it's just about noticing and not judging, not asking why or thinking how terrible this is or why am I always like this, but just noticing and acknowledging and maybe bringing a hand to that area and showing yourself care just in that moment. This image shows a 5-4-3-2-1 exercise. This only needs to take a moment or two, but can help us tune into where we are in our bodies and in our environment, sort of part of that monitoring piece too. So taking a breath and looking around, pausing to notice 5 things you see. Maybe something new you never noticed before, or something familiar that you're just noticing anew. 4 things you feel, maybe the feel of your sweater on your arms, the ground underneath your feet, the hardness or softness of the chair beneath you. 3 things you hear, often a sound you hadn't noticed a moment before. It might be the buzz of the lights or a bird outside. 2 things you smell. It might be the smell of the leaves outside or the coffee you just sipped. And finally, 1 thing you taste. It might be the lingering taste of something you just ate or something noticing your own saliva. You can do all 5, or you can shorten to 3-2-1. You might do this in a moment before an event or something you're nervous about, or before you respond to something that you know is going to take a lot of energy. Just ground yourself in that moment. A couple other body practices we've got links to here that you or your youth might try or have tried before. One's called progressive muscle relaxation. This is the practice of tightening and then releasing your muscle groups, one area at a time. It often starts with the toes and moves up the body to your face and scalp. As I think Lisa said at the beginning, we can often tell ourselves to relax your shoulders, just relax, don't worry about it. But we often simply can't do this in the moment. So this practice of tightening and then releasing brings attention and focus and then warmth and loosening to these very parts of the body until the whole body is softened and relaxed. And just gives us that mindful experience of what that's like. The last link here is called a body scan. This is often a really helpful practice to relax the mind and body for sleep, as it's often done lying down. It also often starts with just noticing the toes, moving slowly up the body inch by inch, without judgment of how that body part feels, maybe being thankful for that body part and how without you even noticing that body part, it got you through the day. I've often fallen asleep only halfway up my body, and that's okay. The next slide is another practice of mindfulness that comes from some researchers like Kristen Neff. Neff noticed that there's a Western cultural belief that self-criticism is thought to be motivating and it'll lead to better behavior. In contrast, Neff and other researchers argue that self-criticism often leads to negative self-fulfilling prophecies and actually gets in the way of getting things done the way you would like. So she talks about the way out of self-criticism is self-compassion or self-kindness. So offering yourself the compassion and comfort that's needed in that moment. And this isn't just about pretending things are all fine and rosy, but in fact, maybe noticing regardless of that, and maybe even because of that, you can still feel cared for, and you deserve to feel cared for, and how to do that for ourselves, because we often don't really practice it very, very well. So to practice this kindness towards self, we can cultivate loving kindness. And this is sort of a typical mantra you might come across. May I be safe. May I be at peace. May I be as healthy as I can be. May I live with ease and accept myself as I am in this moment. These statements can be directed toward yourself or toward others as we think about those we're caring about or those maybe we're struggling with. And all of the world, we can offer this. May others be safe. May others find peace. May others be healthy. May others live with ease. So this practice of loving kindness and self-compassion is about setting that intention to be kind to ourselves and to those around us, finding that sort of that common humanity with others. And when we think about self-compassion and parenting, we can support and teach our children to develop mindfulness and self-compassion, but we also recognize that children don't learn best through lectures, they learn best through modeling. So when we model this self-kindness toward ourselves and sort of, contrast that self-criticism that we might find ourselves often doing in front of our kids with self-compassion, that can be a really helpful model. And further, parents need significant self-compassion because frankly, we make mistakes and parenting is just plain hard. So acknowledging this and recognizing we're part of a group with other caregivers, caregiving through the past, behind us and around us now. And so we can offer ourselves kindness and compassion. So the last little bit I'll say about mindfulness is some really helpful and good news is that the latest scientific research around mindfulness reveals that only a few minutes to like 10 or 12 minutes of mindful pausing a day can yield really significant benefits like increased attention, focus, creativity, calm, resilience, and compassion. But even just that one moment at a time can bring that heart rate down and settle so one can respond differently. So it might help to recognize that we can practice this in any moment through the flow of our daily life. It doesn't have to sort of be I have to do mindful, meditation 45 minutes every day. It can just occur through our days. And some examples might include going for a mindful walk or even pausing to look out the window, focusing on something, paying attention to it, maybe describing 5 things about it in your mind, or that mindful eating or sipping tea. Just that slowing down, savoring that flavor. Maybe enjoying the softness of the blanket or a sweater around you. Pausing to kind of really feel that. Our senses can help us slow down maybe when we light a scented candle. Or noticing what we're grateful for. We just had Thanksgiving, but we can do this, should do this every day, a few times a day, of just feeling gratitude, just pausing for that moment. And once you've got a really good experience like that going, really enjoying it and savoring it, taking 5 or 10 seconds to protect that and stay with it and feeling open to it in our body. Research has shown that when we truly notice and live in these moments, we're actually transferring that felt sense of calm and security they lend us to that long-term memory. And the longer and more intensely those brain neurons fire together, the more they'll be wiring in this inner lasting strength into our brain that can be a resource when we really need it and when our kids are really needing it. And that's the real gift we can model and teach our children. Anything anyone wanted to add around mindfulness?
I just wanted to add, I don't know about you guys, but when I work with kids and I talk about breathing, often the first thing I get is that doesn't work. I tried breathing. And, I could imagine parents having that same experience. And it's sort of like not asking them the first time to practice breathing when they're already up here, and to make it, like Susan said, part of your everyday. So it doesn't become something different. It's hard to learn to do something when you're already stressed out, but making that part of, so when I talk to kids, I said, you don't learn how to read or do math when you're stressed out very well. And these things are the exact same. You have to practice it. It has to be part of your everyday, so that when you are stressed, then you're able to engage in that kind of activity. And, a lot of these things, sitting and, petting a pet or holding a blanket aren't rocket science per se, but they're so, so helpful, just being present and having that time to look after yourself. And I love the gratitude, the self-compassion, because we tend to be so hard on ourselves. It's so important to highlight that. So thanks, Susan.
Yeah, thanks. And I think we're moving back to Dave.
We are moving back to Dave, and he's doing movement.
All right. On to movement. I get to talk about the easiest one. If there was a medication that gave you all the physical and psychological benefits of movement, of exercise, it would be almost for sure the most important medication we had. It would be the highest selling medication we had. It would be something that everybody would be after. And it's hard. Movement is something that we don't always enjoy. And I know that the couch is very, very inviting. I know I find it that way. But movement has so many positive aspects to it. All by itself, movement has massive physical benefits. It changes all kinds of things physiologically within you. We won't talk about those because I don't know them that well, but I know that it's true. Psychological benefits are also massive. And there are different ways that we can use movement. And again, I think people generally know this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, but I don't think people are always aware of the different ways that we can use movement. One of the ways that we can use movement is preventatively. And that is getting your regular exercise. That is going for walks. That is connecting with people as you go for a walk or as you play hockey and you sit in the dressing room and are social together. All of these different things are sort of preventative. They help us. But there are also elements of exercise that are really important sort of at critical moments. And Lisa might have something to add here, but I'll do my best on this. One of the treatments for people who get really, really elevated in terms of emotion is to do intense physical exercise, and I mean intense. So we are doing wind sprints. We are heart rate way up, puffing, panting, sweating like crazy. This is one of the treatments for people who get escalated, because one of the things that happens when we exercise really hard is it tends to shut down other things that aren't quite as important at that moment, one of which can be strong emotions. And so when you find yourself getting escalated, your body's full of all kinds of things that are kind of putting you in fight or flight mode. So fight, go for a good hard run, play some hockey, do some wind sprints of some sort or other, lift some weights. If you do that, it tends to burn off some of those hormones that are within us, that are making our heart rate go up and all the rest of it, and it's bringing us down. And at the end of it, people tend to feel way better, and almost nobody in the moment wants to do it. Okay, and so this is the really, really hard part. And I'm so appreciative of what Lisa said before, and I think it's so important that I'm going to say it again. All of these practices, it doesn't matter whether it's connection or whether it's mastery or mindfulness, movement, and monitoring, all of them require practice, all of them. And if we don't do them, it's great to know about them, but if we don't do them, we don't get anywhere. And so movement, in some ways, this is the easiest one. This is the simplest. It is absolutely concrete. Go for a walk, lift some weights, play a game, like play a sports game, make your heart rate elevated, walk on the treadmill. It is super concrete. Doing it is a hard part. And so one trick for helping do things, and this is with regard to sort of everything. You can, so I'm hoping at the end of this, I really hope. So remember at the beginning, Lisa said, making one change can totally divert course over a long period of time. I'm hoping you pick at least one and you choose to do it. It is way easier to do things when you decide ahead of time that you're going to do it, and you're always going to do it at the same time, and you are, and it's never going to be a choice. So let me give you an example. I read a book of a guy who was talking about forming habits, and he wanted to do more exercise. And what he started with actually was kind of odd, but it worked for him. What he started with was every time after he went to the bathroom, he did 2 push-ups. So inevitably, throughout the course of the day, you are going to go to the bathroom. And then immediately after, I'm going to do this. And so this is something that we call behavior chaining. After I do one thing, then I'm going to do another thing. After I get out of bed, I will go walk on the treadmill for 15 minutes. When I wake up, I will do my breathing exercises for 2 minutes. When I wake up, I will do a self-compassion exercise for 5 minutes. After I eat breakfast, then I'm going to do. So we take something that we always do, always, and we pair it with something that we want to do. And so an example for me is breathing exercises and driving. Whenever I get to a stoplight and it's red, I do my breathing exercises. There is absolutely nothing else I can do at that point. So I might as well do my breathing exercises. And so that is something that is paired for me. And it took a little bit of work, but now it's something that I always do. And I have similar things for exercising. Okay. So I'm going to encourage you to make it super concrete. It's nice to walk away from this presentation and say, wow, these things are important and I need to do them. Chances are, if that's all you do, you're probably not doing them. When are you going to do it? With whom are you going to do it? What time of day, what day of the week? Make a specific concrete plan. And that's how we get where we're going in terms of actually making changes. Okay. And again, if you think about exercise, it's the easiest one to do it with. And so I love that one. And personally, that's where I would start, but everybody starts in a different place. Okay. And so I'll encourage you to pick at least one of these things and get going on it. And maybe you've got 1 or 2 of them going already, and that's great. Doing them with your kids, again, if we're thinking about increasing our kids' resilience, increasing our kids' mental health and well-being, then doing some of these things together is absolutely fantastic. And again, teaching them how you get these things done, because we can have the sort of vague intention that, yep, I want to do this, but that rarely turns into actual behavior. A specific concrete intention turns into actual behavior. I'm sure at this point, my colleagues will have a bunch of things that they want to add, so please jump in, you guys. Do the shuffle over.
I was just going to add, in terms of the exercise, how many times do you not want to go to the gym or work out or do something, but after you do it, you feel better? So I try to keep that in mind when I'm laying on the couch and I don't want to go to whatever class I'm signed up for. And that also helps to have something signed up for and to do something with someone. So you have a accountability sort of.
And I don't know if you heard what Lisa did, but she actually talked herself into it. And talking yourself into it is a great strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I will feel better at the end. I don't feel like it now, and I will feel better at the end. And that is, again, personally, that's something that I say to myself all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The couch is so nice, and it doesn't look that nice outside, and I don't want to go for a walk, but I will feel better at the end. So, yep, up you get going.
So if Dave stopped after the couch is really great and it's really crappy outside, he probably wouldn't have gone. But it's sort of like tweaking that with a positive kind of thought at the end. And, I think that exercise is so important for stress. When we're stressed, our body releases all those yucky chemicals into our bodies. If we just let them sit, there's lots of research that shows it's not good for you, for your mental health, not good for your physical health. So it's so important for so many different things.
And
Anybody else want to add?
Yeah, I think kids really need to hear that it's really hard in the moment, right? That couch feels amazingly well. And I'm going to tell myself, yes, it does feel great. And I won't feel great after I stay on it all day long. And yet I will feel a lot better if I actually go for a walk or go play with my friends, play pickup hockey, whatever that is, or, basketball for, half an hour outside. So I get a little bit of that sunshine, the vitamin D, the social interactions, because often it's not just the movement. For many of us, exercise actually comes with some social interactions, with those meaningful connections, with even mindful moments, right, where we can stop and how do I make that ball go into where it should go, or should it puck the right way? So all of those things actually often do come together when we do move, and yet in the moment it's hard. And I think that when we allow ourselves to say it out and kids hear it, it actually makes it easier for them to respond. So we don't just model the behavior, we actually make it a little bit more, we would say, explicit, right? So they hear, okay, it's not just hard for me, it's not because I'm really lazy that I don't go exercise. It feels way easier not to, and yet it's really important. And I think we can go to some resources, right? And do some takeaways.
Yeah.
Generally.
So I'll just quickly summarize what we've talked about. So we talked about the meaningful connections, that how important it is for you just to have some time with your kids where you're present and you're doing things that you both enjoy, or maybe that your kiddo enjoys a bit more than you do, and to validate where they're at. Mastery, help your child develop an interest, recognize that they can learn and really feel good about, developing that competence, that they can be good at things. That's so important for so many reasons.
So I have to tell you an immediate story here. As this presentation was going on, Lisa hands me her phone, and it's her son saying what he got on a test. That's mastery, okay? He's excited about doing well on a test. I got to tell mom.
There you go. And then monitoring, which we feel is so important. We added this as the fifth M, noticing what's going on in your environment, what's going on in your body and your thoughts and your behavior, as well as the same for your child. Mindfulness, like Susan talked about, being present in the moment, non-judgmentally, breathe, notice your body, 5 senses. And again, these are not things that necessarily take a huge amount of time, but are so important for our well-being. And you might get the eye roll when you mention these kinds of things from your kids, but model it, show, talk about it, and just, think about different ways you can integrate it into their everyday. And move, like Dave talked about. It's so, so important for our bodies and our minds, and it's a great way to connect with others and keep us accountable. If you set a time and a date with someone to go for a walk, you're much more likely to do it. And I think now, I don't know if Susan or Anna want to go through some of these great resources that we have. One thing I want to say is that sometimes this stuff is not easy as a parent. It's not easy to get your child sometimes to get up and go out. If you're struggling and you try this and you're frustrated, reach out for some help. And I think that in our resources, we may have some community resources as well. But this stuff, it can be hard. It can be hard to get your kids to be motivated. And I would just say, don't be afraid to reach out and get some help if you need it.
Yeah, and on this first slide, we have links to different videos that some of them we covered in this presentation. Some were previous presentations. So the first 3 are actually links to YouTube videos that you can watch. If you're not yet tired of our faces, you will see them again in those presentations as well. And they're on the WRDSB YouTube channel. And those are shortened links. So hopefully they're a little easier to put in. And you can put in YouTube, you just look for Achieve Mastery. You can look for different types of breathing as well. And there are way more than just the ones that are here. And we really encourage you to try different ones, because you might find the one that you like much better than the ones that Susan talked about, or you might stick to these because they're simple and quick to use. We encourage you to try some simple yoga practices. They're great ways to connect to your body, to be mindful, and to breathe as well. So try those and try different ones as well. And Susan, do you want to talk about more community resources for teens?
Yeah, we just popped in these. There's some of these apps and websites that might specifically be appealing to teenagers, because it's hard to just sort of tell them to try something out. I know with my kiddos, they aren't always ready to listen, but if they're given a few options and start exploring and find something that works for them, then some of these apps are made especially for teens and by teens even, and focusing on teen issues. There's one on eating disorders and challenges that way. The one at the bottom, jack.org, that's made for teens by teens. So just exploring some of these yourself, or maybe with your teen, and playing around with what might sort of draw their attention. And the very last one is just some specific apps that have been sort of developed as stress relief apps for teens. So hopefully that gives you a few resources to start with, and you might find your own as well. And that's everything.
And so on wrap up, if there are some community places you can reach out to, depending on your child's age, but there's Front Door, which is a single point access to community mental health services. And there's also something called 24/7 that you can reach out to for a number of different services. Any others people would like to mention? Those are the main ones, I think. Well, we hope this is helpful. We hope that you've enjoyed it. Look for other things on our YouTube channel. And yeah, I guess we'll sign off now.
So, thank you.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.